Hello, everyone. Welcome and thank you very much for joining La Grupeta podcast. This is a very special episode for us because it is our first content in English. So, if you don't know us yet, La Grupeta podcast is a space specialized in recreational cycling. Today, we will talk about sleep and recovery, an issue that we all know is very important, but we don't really know how to manage it. For that, we talk with Nick Littlehales, one of the pioneers in sleep coaching, who has worked with many of the greatest athletes in the world, such as Cristiano Ronaldo and Chris Froome, to mention just a few names. So, before we continue, thanks again for listening. And if you want more content like this in English, drop us a line on Instagram at La Grupeta Pod. And thanks to our sponsor, Specialized. With that said, here it is our conversation with Nick. Hello, Nick. Welcome and thank you for accepting our invitation to join La Grupeta podcast.
No.
It is a pleasure for us to have you here.
Thank you very much. It's my pleasure to be with you as well.
Nick, in the past, you have worked with Cristiano Ronaldo, Chris Froome, among other elite athletes. What can we learn from what you have done with them?
I think the first thing that we have to sort of focus on is the perception of sleep is one thing. It's something we generally do at the end of our day when we've got nothing else better to do. It's not really a performance criteria. It doesn't stop us doing everything we want to do, whether we're whatever occupations or lifestyles we create for ourselves. I think what we do understand is that, why on earth does it take up, over 30% of every day? We spend more time sleeping or trying to sleep than we do, working or training or cycling. So it's kind of like a weird area in this health pillar area that we've been ignoring for such a long time. So I think it's just the sort of new generation is about, can we define what's going on in that 30% of our lives? What can we do to maybe improve it? How can we manage it better? How can we optimize it better? Because there's no doubt that we have to do it as humans. And while we're in a sleep state, there is an enormous amount of things going on. So while you're asleep, it sort of happens so quickly. You sort of fall asleep and then you wake up. But during that process, it's like going on a major training exercise. It's like having a great nutritional plan. It's like sports psychology. There's all sorts of things that are going on during that period of time that benefits us all. And we've just been ignoring it. So I think what we can learn is that actually, elite athletes are nothing more than human beings. And our ability to recover naturally in any 24-hour process is a lot easier than most people think. The trouble is we don't spend time looking at it. We don't spend time finding out how we could do it. So it becomes more of a problem than something we should work out. So I think when you're looking at elite athletes, all they do is they've just caught up. The work that I've been doing over the years, they've just caught up and go, well, we don't want to waste valuable time sleeping without the benefits. We certainly know that it has a power that enables to run faster or cycle longer or more consistent levels of performance. So I think it's just something we should all recognize. It's not just about elite athletes. It's just there's one little area crazy in our fast-moving technological world 24/7 where we can do absolutely anything we want and something will happen tomorrow we can do even more, that we've not really focused too much on this area. So I think all we're doing is focusing on it and seeing how we can optimize that stuff, because we're all trying to make the most of every day. We're all trying to push the boundaries. We certainly want to live longer. We certainly want to make the most of every moment we're doing, and we certainly want to achieve our goals. So I think that's why it's becoming more of a performance criteria rather than just something you do at the end of your day.
Nick, before we continue talking about sleep and recovery, we would like to know a little more about your story. How did you become a sleep coach and how did you end consulting for a team like Manchester United in the late 90s?
I became part of uh, a furniture business, which is part of the sleep industry. And that's what I was doing. I found the whole sleep industry as a crazy world. It was all about mattresses and pillows. I ended up being the international sales and marketing director for a big company over here in the UK and around the world. And I just thought everybody talks how important sleep is. But the reality is everybody just has a random approach. So I'd worked with lots of clinical professors. I set up the first sleep council in the UK because there was no organization that looked after that area. I was the chairman of that for a long time. And I suppose I got to a point in my mid 40s where I had a very successful career. Um, but it sort of seemed that everything I did didn't really have any impact on sleep. So it just so happened that my UK office base was in Oldham in Manchester, which is north east in the UK. Um, I was sitting there twiddling my thumbs. I wanted to go off and do something completely different. Sort of given up on the sleep industry, if you want per se. And the local football club, which was Oldham Athletic, not many of your listeners will know them, but it was a local football club in Oldham. And they asked me to sponsor the shirts. And because I was part of this big company. So I did. That meant I was invited to a few football events in the local area. And that just happened to be way beyond Manchester City being famous. The only local club beyond Oldham Athletic was Manchester United. So I was actually at an event. Alex Ferguson at the time was at the event. So we were sharing a glass of wine, chatting about stuff, and he was quite interested in the fact that, I was this guy who's sponsoring these shirts with this company name that was all about mattresses. Um, so he's always been intrigued by things that are not necessarily the obvious. And so we had a conversation, and it basically went, do you actually look at what players do when they're away from the club? The coaches, the trainers, the physios. And he said, no. I said, well, that's where I come in, is when you go home and you go to sleep. Okay. So that developed into a conversation. I was invited into the club. We started having conversations with the physios. I was still working for my company. I'm trying to keep this answer to your question short. But what happened was that, yes, they're human beings, they're sleepers, but they're also, high performers. And so I was able to investigate my interpretation of this world of sleep within their environment. And that's where it kind of started. I think it was any other club, anywhere else, that conversation would have never developed. It was sort of the late 90s. It was a time when he'd gone through some particular challenges at Manchester United, as you will no doubt know. They almost got relegated. He almost got fired. Um, and it was like, can we look at other things to sustain the future? And I just happened to pop up at that particular time. So anyway, we did a few things. There were certain players around called Mr. Beckham, Ryan Giggs, the class of '92. I don't think we were on Twitter or Instagram or TikTok in those days. I think we were just getting used to how to use a phone. And I think it was within that generation, it was sort of like, well, if Alex Ferguson thinks that we should focus on recovery and that this guy's got some, not proven, not clinical ideas and thoughts, I think we should get involved with it. So Ryan Giggs was one of the first players who took a great interest into, what I was thinking about. But they all, that team at the time was very sort of British, it's a very UK orientated team apart from a few. They played for the national squad. So when they went to the England national squad, it was a World Cup in '98 in France. And they started talking to the coaching staff and manager at the time about this guy who comes in and talks to us about sleep. That made them go, "What? What's that all about?" The physio at the time for the England squad was shared with Arsenal Football Club. He was a guy called Gary Lewin, and Gary Lewin, got in touch and said, what the guys keep talking about stuff, and I'm interested. That happened to coincide. It's always about timing in life sometimes, and taking your opportunities when they appear. You don't see that they're opportunities sometimes at the time, but it's kind of like just keep turning left or turning right because you never know what's around the corner. So there happened to be a French manager called Arsene Wenger who just joined Arsenal, and he had the most radical, maverick approach to never mind elite athletes, footballers. And so he gave me the authority to go and speak to the first team squad at Arsenal. And that was a complete mashup of cultures. You had Cesc Fabregas, you had Thierry Henry, you had Ali Bayor, you had Gael Clichy, you had Thomas Rosicky. They were coming from all over Europe and all around the world. So that was my first engagement as trying to talk to a group of athletes, footballers, young, no fear, you know, financially sound, adored, culturally all over the place, language problems, would they understand what I was telling them? And I think it was at that moment where I had to be honest, make up my job because the press picked up on the fact that this guy is going around talking to, Arsenal football players, Manchester United players, England players about sleep. They had no idea what that was about. They had no clue what that was about. So they just called me a sleep coach. And that's where I suddenly had to sit down and go, well, that's me. I'm a sleep coach now in sport. What is that job? What does it look like? What am I going to say to them? And that's really when it sort of started in sort of the late 90s, 2000. Since then, we've been, Tour de France teams, every single sport you could think of internationally, any age group, any gender.
Si ustedes están acá escuchando las 1000 maneras de vivir el ciclismo, es porque saben que este deporte es el camino para reinventarse. Innovar o morir, en eso creemos los ciclistas, en eso cree Specialized. Nick, you have mentioned before how different was the technology available in the 90s compared to what we have now. We have not only social media and smartphones, but also sleep tracker devices and apps. How this change have affected our sleep and how can we take advantage of the current technology?
I think there's two sides to it. In sport and in life in general, we have got these things available to us, and they can be negative, right? And they can be positive. It's how we use them. And I think what we've done is whatever generation you sit in at the moment, it's what you do with this technology. It's not about it's good or it's bad. It's what you do with it. And I think when certainly, I mean, if you can't measure it in sport, you probably don't do it. Um, that's the sort of mindset. But that became almost obsessive. It's almost like a compulsive disorder that we're able to track everything. We can create analysis about everything. And I think it's not sort of looking back to an era where you could just do what you like, drink, smoke, eat burgers, and play sport or live life. We've moved on from that, of course, but I think within that, what we've done is we have to now learn about what we do with this, data, um, how we manage it, how much it impacts it. Because the one thing that hasn't changed is we're still human beings with brains and bodily functions. We're still very much connected with our planet and the circadian rhythms of that planet, and those things haven't changed. But humans keep creating things that makes it more difficult for us to be on this planet, when actually we should be concentrated on things that resynchronize ourselves with our planet, because it's really important to us in so many ways. Never mind climate change or this, or how we all live on this planet, and what does it look like. So I think that sort of natural relationship with that process has to be your paramount piece of data collection. It has to be what drives you every day, is how do you operate as a human. So I think the point is where we are now, um, is that there was lots of people absolutely so excited and flying the flag for creating data, to tracking things, to what does that mean, how can we improve ourselves in so many ways. And in certain parts of our lives it's really important, because we can find out ways to cure things, and we can find out ways to do other things. But I think in general terms, what they're doing now in sport is being far more selective, because data collection and analytics is very intrusive. It can create as much anxiety and stress as it can. This is what you need to do. And I think the sleep analytics has been the one that's really exaggerating that fact, right? And that's because you've gone from no education, right? Nobody talks to you about sleep. Nobody at all. And then suddenly you put a tracker on. Suddenly you've got an app. Suddenly you've got this thing. You've suddenly got a thing on your ring, and it's creating data that you just have no knowledge about. And so there's already medical terms for you know our our inability to manage and control this sort of 24/7 world that we live in, which that's part of. So I think I always like to focus on to create natural talent. If you're constantly analyzing a player, in every single way, and then you're starting tracking their sleep, which is a private space for most human beings. It's a private time for most human beings. If you start tracking absolutely everything, basically, guys, I'm never going to leave the house. You know, I'm never. I create such a behavioral attitude to my day that I can't go near the supermarket. I can't eat this. I can't drink that. I can't do that. I can't smile. I can't laugh. I can't go to parties. I can't do this. I can't do, because it's all going to reveal itself in the data. And yet, what you want me to do actually is to my natural talent, you know, the decisions I make, my alertness, my awareness, my getting in the right place at the right time, my desire to win, my desire to do stuff, all becomes so analyzed that actually you stop doing things. So I think that's where our danger is if we're constantly tracking everything, we might end up not doing anything.
Nick, let's get into cycling. In terms of sleep and recovery, is cycling different from other sports such as football?
I think the answer to that is no. But I think there is definitely a cyclist mindset, and And I think when you get into the professional world, they don't like walking, they only like riding. It's they like to be in that position on the bike, and there's a physical form to that. They're using their muscles in a particular way, which is pedaling and power. So anything like walking or swimming or something like creates a different set of muscle groups. So they sort of feel as though they're part of the machine. You know, they are the engine on this bike, and it's really important for them to achieve what they do, which is not. So I think the clear thing is, you know, you do tend to ride for many kilometers. You do tend to do that more than, you know, 2 or 3 times a week. You do invest in equipment. You do invest in all sorts of areas to be able to do that. And you're also, you know, even the professionals, they're riding on everyday roads, which is not great. You know, they don't go out resurfacing all the roads for our fancy bikes with little wheels and stuff like that. So there's a lot going on within the whole sport, but I think your ability to recover is absolutely key. And all of you will know, you know, if you're on a Grand Tour, Giro d'Italia, the Vuelta, Tour de France, 3 weeks, you know, 200k a time, mountains and all sorts of stuff, is if you can't recover, even just within a small peloton group of friends, just coming off the front and just having a little bit of time being dragged along or protected from the wind. It's not just recovery at night, it's recovery almost every cycle of your day. So, what we look at is find your anchor point to every day. What's your most sort of consistent start to the day? It's all about whether you're a morning person or a nighttime, but what your occupation is. Find that little anchor point, which is a bit like sunrise, which kicks the planet off. And you find that, use something called 90 minutes, which is a clinical way of measuring sleep. And you know then that the first 90-minute cycle of your sleep is different to the second 90-minute cycle, the third 90-minute cycle, and the fifth 90-minute cycle. And five 90-minute cycles is 7.5 hours. 15 minutes in, 15 minutes out gives you your 8 hours, which most people have in their head about how much they have to allocate to sleep. And if you chop your day up into 90-minute cycles from that anchor point, you know, mine's 6:30. So the next one's 8 o'clock. Yeah, yeah. What you get is 16 cycles throughout the 24 hours of your day. And some of those cycles are going to be in nocturnal sleep. You know, so if it's 5 cycles, that would be 11 o'clock into 6:30. Maybe you could choose 4 cycles, which is 6 hours between 12:30 and 6:30. So what I get is a series of timings. I get a series of subconscious moments. I get a series of subconscious, like the first cycle of my day, the second cycle of my day, the cycle before I go to present myself to sleep for 5 or 4 cycles. And when you start getting that sort of recovery rhythm into your everyday approach, what you then find is that recovery is not about this one block at night, right? This is not actually natural. You know, I didn't make this up. I went to a library and I found out that human beings, it's not natural for them to sleep in one block at night. They've always gathered their recovery throughout their day. And it's not in that perceived sleep way. So as soon as you start thinking, get some recovery rhythm to my day. So even when I'm very active, cycling, I'm still thinking about recovery activities, you know, just to let the pedals go or whatever, or what I'm looking at, whatever, or let somebody else do this. Before I go out, what do I do? What do I do when I get back? You know, giving yourself space to recover from the cycle, to rehydrate, to settle down, bowel and bladder, to get the mind into the right place before you present yourself to sleep, because you're putting your brain under too much pressure if you just brush your teeth and jump into bed. So I think a lot of, whether you're amateurs or professionals, the same things apply. Is you can't just jump on and go and then do something else. you've got to have a nice balance. So we can use that technique very clearly to create that nice balance. And that applies even to parents who are about to have a child or have got children in their early formative years. Same things apply. Kids just don't follow the rules of we want to get our 8 hours, because so there's a lot we can learn from all of these things, and that's where it comes into place.
I have a question related to that. We tend to use the words recovery and sleep as if they were the same thing. Are actually the same thing? And how can we recover during the day while we are awake?
Yeah, I think what you start to do is you've got clear mental and physical activities. Even if that's washing the dishes, ironing a shirt, making the bed, or whatever it is, right? Or training or going to the gym. But you also have mental and physical recovery activities. And now this is about having a relationship with your brain that's very adaptable. It's an amazing organ. Maybe we're only using 10% of it, some would say. But what it does is constantly adapt to what you make it do. But what it's trying to do is to follow a rhythm. It is, as far as your brain is concerned, it's just like anything else on the planet. Flowers, animals, you name it, right? We're all synchronized to sunrise, midday, sunset. Phase one, phase two, phase three, phase four. The 24-hour process that goes on repeat every day. So it's our relationship with light, dark, and diminished light. It's our relationship with fueling up and hydrating. It's our relationship with you can't just go for a certain amount of hours without having some sort of recovery break, right? And that sometimes is just visualization. You know, if I'm looking at something dark and problem solving and intimidating, then my brain will create the various emotions associated with that, like a horror film. If I just look outside, suddenly everything doesn't feel that bad. Right? So it's what you're doing is you're understanding the human process. You're understanding how your brain operates, and just maybe in every 90-minute cycle throughout you, just give it a couple of minutes just to look at something different, just to put yourself inside or outside, or by a window, or just have those little moments that gives your brain the opportunity to go, thank you, I will do some stuff, now we can carry on. And what happens is it's able to distribute all the things that we're doing and the pressures we put ourselves under, both mentally and it's able to distribute that and work with that so that when you get round to your nocturnal period, it's able to give you the real recovery that your body needs. And that's to shut you down into an almost paralyzed state so that you can repair, rejuvenate, replenish every single cell in your body, everything that's going on. That's just like it's not like it's not like charging your device. This is way beyond this, right? But it kind of is like that. Your device has got endless amounts of talent. Unbelievable. It has functions, it can do this, it can do that. You can make it do anything you want, can't you? But without, the energy, it's useless, completely useless. So it's kind of trying to put ourselves in that all day long, you need to protect the energy that you're using. And when you're using it and why you're using it, you have to understand that you need to have a little bit of a recharge along the route. You need to not waste time doing things that are not productive. You can gain more out of your device if you manage its battery life well. you know, I, it's kind of like thinking like that. And you know, when I found out a long time ago that we're more aligned to sleeping in a sort of polyphasic manner, which is multiphasic sleeping patterns, rather than monophasic, which is just this one block. So once you start to get like that, one of its biggest disruptors is worrying about sleep. And the reason we worry about it is because we're trying to get all of our recovery in one period of time called nocturnal. When actually we've never termed it like that in the slightest, because we would always gather it in either 2 or 3 times a day, a biphasic, triphasic approach, or a multiphasic approach. And that's because you can actually, you think of mind space, you think of sitting on the bench outside, you're sitting by a coast, you're sitting by the sea, you're sitting under a tree, you're just sitting there listening to some music, meditation. All of these wonderful things that we've got available to us is just actually just taking little moments, listen to a podcast. Do you know what I mean?
During this conversation, you have already pointed out that sleep is a natural function, one that we cannot skip. But what else can you tell us about why it is important to get a good night's sleep?
There's a reason. There's always a reason why the human being has to do something. We can't not sleep, right? So we haven't found a way to challenge that. So it clearly is important. It's important because it is about unlike just charging your device. It's about when the brain has the opportunity to go into that sleep state, it is literally repairing you, right? And that's how you want to think about it. Absolutely everything from your emotional status, from your biological status to how it's processing all the things you've been eating and you're drinking, your thoughts, how it's replenishing and repairing all the cells and everything else that may have been put under pressure. You just have to think about it as though you cannot avoid some sort of defined approach to sleep, because it very, very quickly um, will shut you down for good, right? And or um, you will start to make mistakes that can be fatal, that can be in the long term. Lots of things will start to go wrong quicker than they should. So you'll age quicker. Your organs and your joints will not function as well as you get older, or even you know become very injury prone, or become very burnout prone, or become mentally and health and well-being prone. So you want to really think about it. Is it's you know just rather than thinking about the specifics of what's going on, is just think that this is the most important part of my 24 hours. It should be a natural process. If I can do everything I possibly can to help my brain through those 24 hours on a rolling basis, 365, it's able to then provide me with optimal recovery mentally and physically. So I stop focusing on just because I allocate 10 hours, 9 hours, 8 hours, whatever it is, I allocate the time to sleep. It doesn't mean I'm actually going to sleep. It doesn't mean that my brain will able to repair me as well as it should. So it's what I do from the point of wake throughout my waking hours, the first phase of the day, second and third. It's what I'm doing throughout that period that gives my brain the opportunity to completely repair me. And if I get that more consistent, I stop worrying about it, I become a much healthier person, both mentally and physically. I certainly now realize I can achieve a lot more than I thought I could. And I can certainly do it for longer. And I'm certainly smiling more often. I'm certainly able to enjoy what I'm doing better. And I make better decisions. and I just feel a completely better person. So the importance of sleep is it makes you be the best person you possibly can be, rather than a shadow of yourself with a growing longer shadow as each month, year passes.
In the title of your book, you say that the 8 hours thing is a myth. If that's a myth, is there a minimum time we should be sleeping every night?
It's kind of like what are myths? What I always found is that everybody's got this 8 hours, and a lot of clinicians and a lot of books read about if you don't get your 8 hours and you only get six, you're going to die. What I always found with this sort of your bedroom's got to be 16 to 18 degrees temperature. See, you've got to be, don't eat too late. There's pre-sleep routines. You've got to get your 8 hours and all this sort of stuff. So you just simply can't apply that to human beings. There's night shift workers, there's nurses, surgeons, pilots, there's presenters on television throughout the night. There's all sorts of things that have just been exaggerated over the last couple of decades with 24/7 globalization. So everybody just ignores it. So I thought, well, is that actually true? Yes, it is, right? We put a clock on the circadian rhythm, sun up, sundown, right? Depending on where you are on this planet. And within that process, human beings should be, a bit like hibernation, they should be in a recovery state for around 30+% of that four phase 24 hours, right? Now, that's 24 hours, so 30% of that is eight. Now, we always used to get that 8 hours worth of recovery in a multiphasic way. So a shorter period at night and maybe siesta midday, late afternoon, or that's how we used to do it because we were completely synchronized with that process. But up until we created electric light, we started to shift. So what we did is rather than gathering our recovery throughout that 24 hours, the longer period of recovery being nocturnal, but also balanced with other periods of recovery, is we tried to shove it all into one place. Now, we've been getting away with that one up until probably, the late 90s. And then what's happened is we bring all sorts of other pressures in. So when I was wandering around in the mid 90s without a phone, I had loads of recovery opportunities. They weren't planned for. It's just I couldn't do anything, right? With spaces between waiting for trains or cabs or this or that. I could write things down, but I couldn't do anything with it. So I was people watching and looking at the sky or reading a book or something, listening to music or something. So they were all there sort of protecting this. We're only trying to get our whole recovery in one block at night. Now you shift that. And literally, I won't state the obvious to both of you or anybody listening, but every minute of every cycle we have today can be filled, and not just filled, but engaging us with so many things. So what's happened is that sort of 8 hour block was always a myth, and now that's being explored more than anything. So the answer to the question is yes, you do need to get circa 8 hours worth of recovery in only 24 hours, but it's not necessarily focused on one block at night in that sense. So I focus my nocturnal sleep on 6 hours and four cycles. I try to create more space in my day so it's not so rushed. And also these little tiny, what we call controlled recovery periods, little 2 minutes in this cycle, 2 minutes that cycle, maybe a little 30-20 minute cycle late afternoon, just for me, not even to try and sleep, just to chill out, whatever, is how that sort of develops. So, you certainly can't, there are some people um, who can certainly require more recovery. Uh, there are some people who can certainly operate on less and probably have no side effects from that. But your general point of thing is around, you know, 7 hours of recovery in any day is where you're really trying to look. But you've got to be able to make it happen. You can't just allocate the time. You've got to know how to make it happen.
Nick, another issue that caught our attention from what you say is your encouragement to expose ourselves more to light, particularly daylight. How does light affect our energy levels, and how can we know if we are getting enough light or not?
I will try. I think I started to hear about people being advised to, shut their tech down at night because there's blue light in technology and it's going to keep you awake. And then I saw things like blue blocker glasses coming on board, where it was trying to protect yourself from the blue light off the tech, but allows you to keep using your tech. And I think that was one of the sort of examples of how sometimes we quickly move from one place to another without too much thought. The fact is, in daylight, because we're humans and we should be outside all the time, um, in daylight, there is an energy wave called blue light. And that blue light, through your eyelids, if they're closed, will enter some light receptors behind your eyes. And that blue light will go into a little gland called the pineal gland. And that little gland, triggered by blue light, will produce a hormone called serotonin. And that serotonin will tell your brain to completely unsuppress everything about you, to make you fully active in every single way. When that blue light is not there, like diminished light, sunset, firelight, amber light, red light, yellow light, that sort of thing. So without the daylight, there's no blue light. And then that same gland, not triggered by blue light, produces a hormone called melatonin. And melatonin tells the brain to suppress everything about you. Now, in any 24 hours, that relationship with blue light exposure and diminished light, non blue light exposure is critical to everything that you do. Everything you do. It's the best energy source, but it also keeps you completely synchronized. So, whatever you're eating, fueling up and hydrating, your training programs, everything you're trying to do will be not at its best if you're not even trying to be synchronized with that light, dark, and diminished light process, because it's about these hormones. So your brain is constantly trying to adapt if you're underexposing yourself and overexposing yourself at certain points of the day. So it's a very easy trick. Just grab yourself, get onto the app stores, whether it's Android or iOS, grab yourself a little free Lux light meter, LUX, a free one. Don't get too scientific at this stage. Just get a free Lux light meter, download it onto your device, and it'll just use the camera to measure the level of light around you wherever you are. And suddenly you'll start to get a relationship with outside. It could be 100,000 lux. Just the other side of the glass inside your home, it could be 4,000 lux. A meter inside your house, it could be 200 lux. In your bedroom, it could be 150 lux. In your office, it could be, 200 lux. When you're on a train or a tube or driving your car or in your lounge or in your kitchen, what you get a relationship with is your average exposure should be around 10,000 lux in the first two phases of the day. That means you could be right up at 80,000 lux if you're standing outside. It could be as low as 100 lux if you're sitting in an office. Right? So, what you try to do is realize that what you want is sort of an average exposure around 1,000 lux every hour. And so you do need to increase it, and you do need to know where you are, because you might be trying to be very active in a gym. You might be trying to do lots of professional things in your occupation, but you're in a level of light where you're trying to be mentally and physically proactive, but actually that light is telling your brain to suppress it. So it's a challenge all the time. and you get a better relationship with it. It's absolute game changer, guys. It's just free. It's beautiful. You become completely more synchronized, and everything you eat, everything you drink, everything that comes near you just gets managed in such a much better way. You just wonder why you weren't doing it before.
It was really a pleasure for us to have this conversation with you. So, thanks again for taking the time to share your experiences.
It's been my pleasure. I'm going off for a nice glass of wine and a bit of a nap and enjoy my evening. I'm certainly not going for a 50-kilometer bike ride, not tonight.
Grupeta, it's time to say goodbye. We hope you enjoyed this episode and that this content is useful for you, your friends, and everyone in your cycling group. So please share it with them. Don't forget to follow us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or any other streaming platform. And also on Instagram at La Grupeta Pod. Bye. Producido por 3 de Batio.